Every day at recess, she stood alone, never played, never sat, just stood still by the fence. At first, I thought she was shy or maybe just new. But days turned into weeks, and nothing changed. Curiosity tugged at me until I finally asked, "Why don't you ever sit down?" Her answer made my blood run cold, and within moments, I was calling 911. Every day at recess, while other kids screamed with laughter, ran races, or played on the swings, she stood motionless by the chain-link fence. A small girl with big eyes and a too-quiet presence, she never joined in. At first, I thought she might be shy or just observing, but over time, I noticed something odd: she never once sat down. Not on the benches. Not on the grass. Not even when she looked exhausted. Weeks passed, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. As a teacher, I've seen children cope in all kinds of ways, but this was different. There was something unsettling in her stillness, like she was carrying a weight far too heavy for her small frame. One chilly afternoon, I walked over and gently asked, "Sweetheart, why don't you ever sit during recess?" She looked up at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't. It hurts too much when I sit." That one sentence hit me like a punch to the chest. I crouched down, trying to stay calm. "Where does it hurt?" She pointed quietly and said nothing more. I knew right then that this wasn't just a shy child with a preference for standing. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I immediately called the school counselor, and then 911. Within hours, Child Protective Services were involved. What they uncovered was heartbreaking. The little girl had been suffering abuse at home, too afraid to tell anyone. The bruises were hidden where no one could see, but they revealed everything. Her silent stance was never about preference, it was a cry for help the world had overlooked. And I almost missed it. She stood alone every single recess. While the other kids dashed to the swings or flopped onto the grass with their snacks, she remained by the fence, still, silent, and always standing. At first, it seemed like shyness. Maybe she just preferred solitude. But day after day, no matter the weather, she never sat. Not once. As a playground supervisor, I'd seen all kinds of behavior. But this? It stayed with me. One afternoon, curiosity and concern pushed me to approach her. I knelt down and said softly, "You don't like to sit, huh?" Her eyes flicked up at me, so old for someone so young. "I do like sitting," she said, almost like it was a secret. "But I'm not allowed." "Not allowed? Who says that?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "My dad," she replied. "He says if I sit at school, I'll forget what I did. So I have to stand." I didn't understand at first. "Forget what you did?" She hesitated. Then came words I'll never unhear. "I sat in his chair at home once. He said it was disrespect. So now I don't get to sit unless he says so." My heart dropped. I reported what she said immediately. Within days, an investigation revealed a home ruled by fear. The child's posture, so rigid and obedient, was learned through pain. There were marks old and new hidden under sleeves and silence. What haunts me isn't just what happened to her, but how easy it was for everyone to overlook it. She wasn't misbehaving. She wasn't acting out. She was surviving one recess at a time. She never spoke out of turn. Never caused trouble. Never made a scene. But she never smiled either. Every day at recess, she stood alone near the edge of the playground, arms folded, eyes scanning the ground. She didn't play. She didn't run. She didn't laugh. To most, she probably looked like a quiet child, lost in her thoughts. But something about her silence was heavy, unnatural. As a teacher, I've learned to listen not just to what kids say, but what they don't. So one day, I walked over and gently asked, "Hey there, is everything okay?" She looked up at me with tired, hollow eyes. "I'm fine," she said quickly, almost automatically. But something in her voice trembled. I sat beside her and tried again. "You know, sometimes it helps to talk. Even just a little." She hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "Sometimes I cry at night, but I don't make a sound." If he hears me, it gets worse. I felt my breath catch. That was all she said, but it was enough. I reported the conversation immediately. Authorities intervened, and the truth came pouring out like a dam had burst. She had been enduring severe emotional and physical abuse at home, terrified to tell anyone, trained to suffer in silence. Her behavior wasn't just quiet, it was a signal. A silent cry for help. If no one had listened closely, if no one had asked twice, she might have continued to suffer in the shadows. Not every child can say I need help. Sometimes, their silence is the loudest scream of all. She never played tag. Never climbed the jungle gym. Never sat on the grass. Every recess, she stood in the same corner of the playground, arms wrapped tightly around herself, eyes always downcast. At first, I thought she was shy or just adjusting to a new school. But weeks passed, and she never moved from that spot. Rain or shine, warm or cold, she stood, still and silent. Something didn't sit right with me. One day, I approached gently, crouched down to her level, and asked, "Why do you always stand here, sweetheart? Don't you want to play with the others?" She looked up, startled. Her voice was soft. "I can't play. I might get in trouble." "Trouble for playing?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She nodded, then glanced around before whispering, "He said I'm not allowed to touch other kids, or sit outside. If I do, he says bad things will happen again." My heart dropped. That one answer told me everything I needed to know. I reported it immediately. The school counselor and authorities got involved within hours. What they uncovered was worse than I had feared. She had been subjected to ongoing abuse at home, psychological manipulation, and threats that left her too scared to move freely, even at school. She wasn't standing because she wanted to. She was frozen by fear, trapped by invisible rules no child should ever live under. All it took was one question, one moment of paying attention, to bring her truth to light. She's safe now, finally beginning to heal. But I still think about how easily we might have missed her pain. Sometimes, the quietest children carry the loudest stories. She was always there, same spot, same posture, standing alone near the fence during every recess. She didn't run. Didn't sit. Didn't speak. Just stood, arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes on the ground. I assumed she was just quiet, maybe adjusting to a new environment. But weeks passed, and nothing changed. She never once joined a game or sat down, even when she looked exhausted. One chilly afternoon, something told me I couldn't ignore it any longer. I walked over, knelt beside her, and asked gently, "Why don't you ever sit or play, sweetheart?" She didn't answer at first. Just looked at me with eyes too old for her age, haunted, guarded. Then she whispered, "I'm not supposed to sit. If I sit, the bruises hurt more." My heart stopped. "What bruises?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She slowly pulled up her sleeve, revealing dark, fading marks that had no place on a child's body. I felt a chill run through me. I told her, "Stay right here," and walked straight to the office with shaking hands. I called 911. Authorities responded immediately. The investigation uncovered a nightmare, physical abuse that had been going on for months, hidden behind silence and long sleeves. She had been taught not to tell, to endure, to hide. But one question, one moment of paying attention opened the door to her rescue. She's safe now, with people who protect her and listen to her voice. But I still think about how close we came to missing it. How easy it is to overlook quiet pain. Sometimes, the smallest questions reveal the deepest wounds. And sometimes, a child standing alone is really screaming for someone to see them. At first glance, she blended in like any other student. Neatly dressed, polite, always on time. But there was something different about her, something you wouldn't notice unless you looked closely. Every recess, she went through the same routine, walked out to the far edge of the playground, stood by the fence, and stayed there motionless until the bell rang. No laughter, no running, no play. Just silence. I observed her for days, unsure whether to step in. Some kids are just quiet, right? But the consistency of it felt off. So one day, I gently approached her. "Why do you always stand here?" I asked. She shrugged. "I'm okay." I crouched down, trying again. "You know, if something's bothering you, you can tell me." She hesitated. Then she whispered, "If I get dirty, he gets mad. He says girls who play are bad." That one sentence made my stomach drop. I asked more questions, carefully. The answers were even harder to hear. She lived under strict, punishing rules at home. Forced into silence, kept from playing, shamed for being a child. Recess wasn't freedom for her, it was another part of the punishment. She stood still because she was afraid of the consequences of acting like a kid. I reported it immediately. Authorities got involved, and it turned out there was a pattern of emotional and physical abuse behind closed doors, well hidden, until her quiet routine gave her away. That silent recess ritual wasn't a choice. It was a symptom. Now, she's in a safe place. She runs. She laughs. She plays. But I still think about how easily her pain could have gone unnoticed. How loud silence can be when you learn to listen.